Hey guys, welcome back to the 706 podcast. If you heard our last episode, it was a bit of a divergence from our usual format. We talked about our favorite movies of 2016. As you can probably see by the title and description, we are back on the usual format this week, and we're talking about a movie that I brought to the table called It's Such a Beautiful Day, which is by animator Don Hertzfeldt. So before I get into... Actually, I'm sorry. Why don't I let my co-hosts introduce themselves before we go into the movie?
I'm Kirk.
I'm Connor.
Anthony.
All right, so I guess what we've been doing is before I say anything about the movie, we'll have each of my co-hosts kind of go explain their thoughts. So I don't know who to start with. Does anyone want to start?
The first take can influence the others.
Who wants to be the first? Who wants to set the tone for this discussion? Yeah, Kirk. I want to hear what Kirk has to say.
Okay. All right.
You're the one I'm most nervous for, so I'm going to rip off the Band-Aid.
Why that?
Yeah.
Like, why?
No, I would probably be more nervous about Anthony, honestly.
Well, Anthony's out for blood. You're just kind of less likely to enjoy it.
Holding my hands up, asking why.
Anyway, go on, Kirk.
Why? I'm less likely to enjoy it because there are abstract elements. Sure, that's very true. I love this movie, though. I thought it was great.
Awesome. I'm glad.
Yeah, no, I thought...
You're making a bunch of noise.
I thought it was very good. It's very affecting. I traditionally value how a movie makes me feel and how it makes me think. So I really enjoyed how this movie made me feel, even if it was very depressed and desolate and kind of in despair, and also a little nihilistic and just dissociated. But it's a great movie. It's Tony will explain what it is, I guess, but I thought it was great. I thought that I have a few minor complaints, but it's more about the actual mechanics of the film than it is about the concept or the ethos. So I enjoyed it immensely. Enjoy is a weird word. I cherished it, I guess. So that
is fantastic. Anthony, okay, what was wrong with this movie? What was terrible?
Well, I don't want to go now. I want Connor to go first.
You want to go last?
He probably didn't think he's going next. So I'll say this movie, I definitely, this is one of those respect. I feel respect. I don't feel love exactly. How can I say this? It's a movie that is a very interesting use of animation, a very clever, original take, and we can discuss more about that. Mostly it's hand-drawn in sort of a hand-drawn style on paper with real texture, but then we have also always going on, we have other elements, photorealistic elements that look like, that look almost stop-motion-like. So it's a very interesting stylized use of real footage combined with this kind of very simple animation style, which folds into sort of the real kind of content of the movie and the meaning of the movie. So that was really smart. And it's a movie that takes on this huge topic of like the meaning of life, from a kind of very or not the meaning of life, let's say, but life as a subjective experience. So that was and that's of course what we're all interested in kind of in thinking about. So it's the kind of one of the most, lofty kind of modern topics you can think about. I'm personally, that kind of stuff doesn't appeal to me quite as much. So, but anyway, we'll talk about this more later. I want Anthony to have his opinion shared.
Well, the reason I asked for that quick break, real quick, is I was going to ask Tony: is this the same guy who did World of Tomorrow?
Indeed, yes. They're very. It's very. You can instantly tell something he made.
Okay,
yes,
I just didn't see his thing pop up.
Did you watch World of Tomorrow?
No, but I know Tony had recommended it. I'd seen the stills or whatever.
It's only like 15 minutes.
I was just thinking of Tomorrowland. I was like,
not Tomorrowland. Departure for sure.
That would be amazing, though. Okay, so I just wanted to congratulate Don Hertzfeldt for passing freshman philosophy class and getting through with some stellar grades and making a film for every guy in your MFA to enjoy. But that's.
Nice. Got you there.
I was pumped. I thought that was going to be Kirk's. That's a Kirk criticism. That's what I was going to hear from him.
Honestly, that's how I felt. I was like, I don't know.
A bunch of frat boys.
Thought it'd be really hilarious to make a movie about life. Any further criticisms?
I think it's like a fine. I think it's fine. I don't think it's like that good. Honestly, I don't really think it's bad either. I think the animation's like I don't really find the animation that interesting, honestly. It kind of reminds me of AJ Schnack's in About a Son, where he uses it for his own documentary. AJ Schnack uses hand-drawn sort of stick figures like that to depict the life of actually Kurt Cobain. As Kurt Cobain tells his own stories, that's what it reminded me of. I don't know which one came first.
This is from like 2020, but he's been working for.
I'm not using that as a criticism of the form or whatever.
This is what it reminds you of.
It's the first thing I could think of. I mean, it is sort of unique. It's sort of a testament to sort of, I think, I don't know how he shot those drawings, but it's sort of a testament to that ingenuity at the least. But I mean, whether it worked or not, for me is a no. I think the film kind of left me.
There were no sorry, that's my bad. There were no moments you liked?
There were no moments where I honestly stick out of my mind. I enjoy some of the anecdotes a little, like some of the quick stories, some of the quick jokes. I laughed at probably at the time, and I can't even think of one now though. To be quite honest.
What did you think about the? Well, sorry, Tony. Do you want to kind of introduce the movie more fully?
Well,
if you'd like, yeah, sure. Well, Don Hertzfeldt, experimental animator. He's done a number of things. He's been nominated for the best animated short Oscar twice. Once last year for World of Tomorrow, which made a huge splash at Sundance. It's on Netflix. It's like 15 minutes. Everyone should watch it. And then once, 15 years back for Rejected, which is it's like a YouTube. It's kind of a viral hit. It's kind of these absurd little vignettes about these rejected cartoons by the network. So his early stuff is it's also very surreal, but his early stuff is more kind of jokey. It's more kind of like, oh, this is so like. There's a character who says, my anus is bleeding over and over. It's like that sort of thing. Whereas this is sort of the later stuff is much more like he's going for sort of I'm going to make something really deep and rubbing his hands
there's
together.
an element of randomness and humor to it.
No, there's definitely humor to this movie. To me, it's more humor. I think it's a funny movie, but it's more of a kind of a chuckle because it's clever kind of humor than a laugh out loud funny movie, which I'm sure.
And the absurd.
Yeah, very absurd,
Well,
especially in the second. So basically what this movie is it's almost kind of not a feature film because it's only 62 minutes, and it's 3 short films about this character he developed named Bill, and the 3 short films in a row, and they're headed by chapter headings in the movie. There's Everything Will Be Okay, I Am So Proud of You, and then the third one is It's Such a Beautiful Day. So they basically, he literally, I don't think he changed them. I think he literally just puts them back to back and called it a feature film, which I could see someone objecting to, but I had no issue with it.
I felt very powerfully that it was.
To me, it didn't. It felt like those chapter endings were arbitrary.
They may as well not have been in there.
Well, I didn't know there were 3 separate films.
Well, it said chapter 2 and then chapter.
So what's the movie about? We haven't even said
what's it about
yet.
Okay, it's about a man named Bill who's kind of slowly going insane. Okay. So there are a couple things going on here. Just sort of the themes of the movie are just sort of the subjective experience of life. You can see why I compared it to Synecdoche, New York. I think you can appreciate why I would make that comparison. There's sort of similar things on its mind, death and life, and sort of the subjectivity of each of our lives, and sort of this life is a series of just neurons firing in our brain, and basically life consists of these different, there's a pain in my left testicle, or the carpet feels really good, and basically for this character that's all life is. It's a series of these kind of moments of pain or pleasure or comfort or confusion, and it never comes together to form any kind of narrative. It's just these a series of moments that define his life, and it's kind of what does it all mean, and he really has no idea. He doesn't know how to contextualize anything. And the other stories we hear about members of his family and these tragic things that happen and these weird and dark things that happen are sort of things that are just about kind of the absurdity of it all, and just what does that even mean? It's it feels like kind of this cosmic joke about all these members of his families getting run over by trains, which is funny, but it's also it's kind of unsettling as well, which I think is a big part of the movie.
It's treated as a joke. It's a 3-time recurrent.
No, yes, it's played as a joke. But
sorry, go on.
And there's that, and there's also the kind of part of the subjective experience of life is the loneliness of life. Sort of these characters in his family will say things to him that, they mean something to them, but not necessarily to him. And there's always a sense of, there's some grander picture and grander design. There's something to their psychologies we're glimpsing at, but we never get a full picture. And there's something, the movie treats this as a very tragic thing. The scenes where a character will say one thing, and it alludes to this whole complex psychology that we never even get a fraction of in all of Bill's life, which is what we see. The other thing is one of my favorite scenes in the movie is the one where he's in the hospital and the guy next to him in his hospital bed can't speak, so he has a machine that plays different sentences. The only one he ever plays is "I am in pain," which I think is funny, but it's also just it's a metaphor for language itself.
Dark. Oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah. It's like all we have are these words we've created to communicate with one another. It's basically pressing a button, "I am in pain," which doesn't really reflect what the reality is. That's just the closest approximation to what we really mean. Because what we mean is impossible to access or really convey. It's just we're doing our very best. So I thought that was very clever and funny, while also being, of course, tragic. So that's my general read. And there are other scenes and moments I like and we could talk about. But that was kind of my read of the movie, and it kind of crystallized on this second viewing. Because on my first viewing, I was just taken aback by the incredible style, the form of it all. I just think is so cool. And I'd never seen the movie that Anthony had mentioned, so I'd never seen anything quite like this. But I love the stick figures juxtaposed with this live action footage and these still photographs and this montage-y Stan Brakhage sort of just assemblage of it all, where it's just
lots of radio static. There's moments where this background noise kind of takes over the narration.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's just a sensory overload. It puts you in the head of this character where life is sort of overwhelming and you cannot sort it into categories. It's just constantly coming at you, and you're constantly dealing with whatever has happened at that specific moment, and it never coheres into anything meaningful. And I thought that was really cool. It's a great example of the form, which is the monologue, which is just kind of Bill's internal monologue. It's this monotone voice going on, describing everything. And then the form of the movie, which is doing this sensory overload, life keeps coming at you thing. So anyway, I think it's an incredible movie. I think he really nailed what he was going for, and anything he does in the future, I will be so down for. But Kirk, you seem to respond kind of most to the movie. What exactly did you glom on to? What were the things in it that made you feel, or that made your ears prick up?
I think elements like I said, nihilistic elements, just feeling not kind of what you said, just this differential significance that, if I say something that's really important to me, it can fall flat for you, and it's very hard. We're kind of trying to play, on the same field but not the same game, and it's something like that.
Right.
Or maybe it's the same game, not on the same field. But it was affecting, and I think Anthony, I do feel like there are some points in the movie where it felt kind of, the word might be not sappy, but kind of tired. With the whole kind of carpe diem aspects of it, he's at the end, he's very peaceful and mindful, and it's such a beautiful day, that's the kind of the consensus, and it's kind of you exercise the past, and you find peace through kind of these intrapsychic trials, and so I really can recognize that that's been done in so many different ways, but I loved how it was portrayed, and I loved that it didn't drag on too long, and I liked all the little things. I will say some things I didn't like about the movie is just I didn't find it to be that funny. I thought it tried to be funny, but it wasn't my sense of humor, I guess. And with the train joke recurring, it's just it didn't land for me, and I'm sorry, and I compulsively rubbing the table, the art style, I liked how it was kind of like a collage in a way, but I didn't really appreciate the actual animation style. To me, you could say it's like someone who has Alzheimer's, right?
It's never specified.
Or
something
dementia,
like that.
Something.
Yeah.
And it's so all the faces look the same, something like that. But it just felt more convenient than anything artistic to me.
I don't think there's anything convenient about it. I think the amount of craft that's going into. I'm sorry.
This is my opinion.
Right, I'm sorry.
I'm not talking to you, Don Hertzfeldt or whatever his name is, but it did like
it was the easiest way to make the movie.
I think it was the easiest way to make the movie. I don't know.
I like the juxtaposition between the stick figures and then the content of the movie and then the other stuff going on. I think there's a lot of.
It felt like one of those the one of those posts on Reddit that's like a top post that's just like a stupid GIF. And it's like just a dumb meme. Like as far as the art, I'm talking about the art style. And, and like I said, I had problems with the mechanics of it. But I can appreciate what it was, and I did really enjoy kind of the various themes that were explored. I was gonna say one more thing, but maybe it'll come up again.
Isn't everything a dumb gift? Aren't we all dumb
No, I
gifts?
think the movie would be fundamentally
God's
different
Reddit
with a different
page.
art style. I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah,
What were you? Sorry, go on. You guys want to talk?
I have something to say. So I was going to say that I was just going to comment on that. I have right at the kind of the fan theory interpretation. Fan theories are often extremely like literalistic, and they don't take for account like stylization and suspension of disbelief. But here's what I believe is that right? Everything that we're seeing, all of the animated sections, everything that we're seeing is from sort of Bill's perspective, say at the time of his death or something like that. So that all the things that we're seeing, right? All the drawings are just sort of his memories, right? And his memories are of such and such, right? Again, as Kirk mentioned, because he has an inability to recognize difference in people, he sees it all the same, or he has the stylized and very vague idea of his past. There's some problems with that if we're taking it very literally like that, but whereas all of the footage that we see that's of real life is rather his in the now kind of perception, is sort of real.
The live action,
his real kind of
bits.
Sense memories, his real the live action bits, the sort of the real kind of central in the now experiences. So that was interesting because then we kind of get a moment where. And I thought this was I was kind of waiting for this to happen, a stylistic device where the drawings are thrown away, so to speak. They're not completely, and we see kind of like life in all of its, kind of real, full 3D, very colorful beauty. I thought that was interesting. So that was my one comment. I think we've already said that already, but I thought it was an effective device. Sorry.
Well, I just want to get back to your point about the guy who who could only reach the button that says "I am in pain" or whatever.
Yeah.
Because in my own reading, the reason for the animation to exist the way it is, as you were saying, to suggest sort of the trappings of language, is sort of getting us back to sort of such a basic thing that you can't read in any other way, of just the stick figures itself. And the overall movie seems to be saying that we're all sort of trapped. We're all sort of trapped by a commonality of the generality in language, that the phrase like "I am in pain" has no actual meaning beyond what we could see, beyond what we just instinctually think of it, and we have no idea how this guy actually is,
right?
Because we know that one, he can't actually reach any other button, and two, that the only image we have of him.
I didn't think he couldn't reach the button. He's only.
I thought they said he could only reach the one.
Maybe I have to check it again. But
okay, well, even regardless of that fact, I mean, we only know he's hitting that button, and two, that we only have this image of him in a hospital chair. It's just possibly tying in that fact, which is where that meaning's coming in. And then the idea, I think, so much of the things hitting at is the absurdity that we think we have of significance in everything, whether it's our memory or our images. And that's why I like it when he picks up actually the note he finds his mom practicing. What does she write? Like, "I miss you" or whatever.
I'm so proud.
Like, and that, I mean, that's as fake as it can be, knowing like whether she actually means it. The note itself does not quite create that instant meaningness, just because she had to practice it so many times. And that the movie seems to be saying too, though, that so much of what actually is meaningful and important happens in a sort of moving way, which is why he always has to drive. He's always walking around, even if it's the same area, he's walking, he's moving, which is why I think it's a interesting moment. I don't know how to take it. I was going to ask you, Tony, is when the epiphany of "it's such a beautiful day" happens. It happens in a still frame without movement, and he's completely static, and that sentence itself is now like a freezing moment.
Right. Well, again, the whole movie is just, as I've said, it's like an onslaught. It's sensory overload. It's moment to moment what you're feeling and thinking, and just being overwhelmed by that. When there's a moment of stillness is when he can finally appreciate, or when he can finally think. And I really like that bit, it's such a beautiful day bit, because it's showing that, like, this doesn't have to be how it is. There is an escape, or there is a way to just take this as it is and appreciate all these little details and see them as part of this beautiful tapestry. And again, the final bit of the movie where he's projected to live forever in the future is the only way you could ever know and experience everything. It's saying how the fact that we can't do that is part of what makes it cool. It's like the mystery of life, that we will never know everything makes it kind of amazing. But the thing about it is that's not at the very end of the movie, is when he has that revelation or epiphany. It's like there's still like 15 minutes left. So it's a fleeting thing. It's like it doesn't last. Like that, you can get into that space, but that's hard to sustain, that state of awe at the universe. It's like you can't live that way forever. Yeah. Is what I think it's kind of.
Because you don't just turn the on switch and like, okay, now you're enlightened and
right. You can't just, or maybe you could, but it's beyond this character's capability. Yeah. He doesn't really glean anything from that. It's just a momentary moment of beauty in this sea of kind of confusion. So that's how I read that scene. But I really like that scene. I think that's part of what makes the last third really work for me. Is you're seeing these new things. You're seeing that, and you're seeing the final bit with him in the fantasy, basically, of what immortality would mean. And then the bit at the nursing home as well, which I think is just really stunning.
That was pretty touching.
But, Anthony, what about it for you? Do you think these are basically, is it that these sort of ideas have just been done to death?
Well, no.
Or what is it? Okay.
So you read that it's such a beautiful day, it's supposed to be earnest. That like he's actually.
I think in the moment it's absolutely earnest, but that it doesn't last. That doesn't.
Okay, but then you read the moment of the sort of infinity, right? Of all those things as like a good thing, and
not a good thing. This is like what it would mean. If he said, they say over and over, Bill can't die. Bill can't die. Okay, if Bill doesn't die, this is the alternative. Right. The alternative is this lonely thing where he floats forever.
Right. Okay. Right. So like all those then like the stories of meeting a new girl, falling in love, of doing this, having your loved ones pass away and all that, instantly is part of the absurdist thing. It's getting at the beginning.
It's sort of like as terrifying as death is. The alternative is it's like worse. That's what it's saying. That's right. That's how I read that that final bit of the movie. But I don't know. But okay, so what exactly?
But my thing about that is it's a type of movement, and the way they're showing it in the exact same way they're talking about how beautiful it is for Bill when he's going through his routines, of how great it is for him just to go on a walk. To see the bridge.
You're saying it's being depicted as like this beautiful thing?
No, I'm saying it's being depicted in the same way. Well, and in the earlier way, it seems to be beautiful, and then this one seems to be what you're saying is kind of lonely. I'm just curious about that juxtaposition.
Well, it can be both. I mean, it's like a reverie. It's like, what would it be? What would this be like? And he's imagining the reality of like continuing forever.
Right.
I thought it was just a consolation. It's just like Soylent Green scene where the guy is, he gets. He can escape his circumstance and see things that he's, can only dream of, and so I thought it was very beautiful. Just in the idea of like, you find heaven in your head when you die, something like that. The mix of whatever kind of chemicals are going on, whatever's released. But so I guess I read it literally that was his death process.
Oh, so that's what he experiences as he dies?
Yeah.
Is that infinite
and the
expansion.
Lights, the stars going out, that was him dying at the very end.
Oh, okay.
But that's
I can see that, absolutely. Yeah.
I did feel like some of the I did want to mention this, and this is in line with things I've said in this podcast a lot. A lot of the decisions felt arbitrary. Some of like the
jokes.
He's on a spaceship and 3 people are eating ice cream sandwiches to not have a stroke. It felt a little bit like the Family Guy manatee thing, where it's just like 3 bubbles.
For that example, right? That's supposed to be. It's a mix of his childhood fantasy. He says he loved rocket ships and his current reality, which is he has to eat ice cream sandwiches to avoid getting a stroke. Because they talk about they make him eat, or they give him ice cream sandwiches. Yeah. But there is a lot of the random, right? Yeah. I think that's kind of
the being hit by a train and the grandma wants to throw him across the room. Some of the more absurd bits.
Yeah, I mean, and it makes sense within like this. It's a very subjective experience, and what we can highlight and what we forget. This obviously the selective attention aspect of it, and I appreciate what it was trying to convey, right? Like, but maybe I'm just too jaded.
I mean, it's just like it's one of those things where I'm sorry, go on.
Like I think of the creation of it, and instead of just the final product, and I think of the creation of it, and I think of the guy just sitting there and saying like, "Let me think how random I can go." Okay,
I see.
The bumps on the paper towel. Coworker spits out a gum while he's talking about genetics, and it's like, I don't understand. It's just like there didn't seem to be. I understood his overall goal, but I didn't understand the objective.
Why that? I mean, I think for each detail, it's one of those things where like it's also subjective. That if we were to sit down and really dig into it, we could probably come up with like a justification for most of that stuff. So to me, it all kind of fed under the continual stream of consciousness. Like he's thinking about ice cream because he has to eat ice cream. He ate ice cream as a kid. He fantasized with a rocket as a kid, and these things kind of come together in the dream of it. And I mean, I didn't.
Well, and that with that gum thing, right? He spits out the gum, and he just talked about how genetics, and this is something that connects his to Bill's own childhood, where he has mental illness in his family, right? And so then the moment where the guy spits out the gum, it's kind of Bill, I think, refusing to acknowledge or refusing to think about that, and that's kind of for us too. It's sort of like a sort of discordant, like let's not acknowledge it, Whereas we were kind of puzzling the kind of implications of it when he mentions that, but.
My favorite part is when he talks about his head, and he's like, "I think it's a trout in my head." It's the William Faulkner-esque moment. My mother is a fish.
Yeah.
Okay. He's watching boxing. A guy gets headbutt. He eats a bunch of crackers. He doesn't want to move. He calls his girlfriend.
I love that. I thought that was fantastic.
What I'm saying is, I think the justification is there is no justification.
I think it's like because I can feel it so vivid. I can imagine that just that violent image
in real
over and
life, all of
over.
your
It's
thoughts don't have
overwhelming.
purpose. That's what I'm saying. Is there is an element of randomness. So I think, like I said, his intention.
You're saying it needs more. There needs to be more of a justification than it's random because it's in my mind.
No, I'm saying that I don't think it needed that, but I just for some reason I'm bothered by the creation of it because it just seems, like I said, like just kind of inauthentic or
I see. No, that to me felt very like I could put myself in that specific moment. I totally.
It was one of those things where it's like
page,
after you hear it, well, you're like, yeah, that makes sense. But it's like you would never think of that.
It's a subjective thing. I'm like, as I was watching it, I could imagine seeing that and experiencing that, and it felt very true to life to me. Again, if it didn't resonate with you, it didn't. That's just as I
the very
watched.
first one. An interesting technique was the awkward greeting.
Yeah, that's great.
You see someone and so that was interesting. That was kind of the hook to the movie, and I think that's one of the things that it's trying to do is it's trying to make you sympathize with Bill through reference to these strange, so personal feeling, subjective moments that like, wow, someone else has had that exact thing happen to them. That's really interesting. Where he has the awkward, like you want to say hi to them, and you say "How's up?" and they say "Way."
Yeah. I like that a
Or
lot.
when he goes to the checkout line and he asks the checkout girl, "How are you?" and she doesn't respond. He goes, "Bill fell used." Like, okay.
Yeah.
We're at about 28 minutes, so if you guys want, we can vote.
Bill is a flaming narcissist. And it's an example of this postmodern millennial entitlement. No, I'm kidding. It would be interesting to explore the movie in its time and
what it says
consider
about
it. Yeah,
21st century.
When was it? When did this come out? 2000.
I think 2012.
All of our
version.
lives have to have this kind of hyper emotional significance in some way or another, and we impart that upon ourselves. And we all aspire to be certain things that are unattainable, and I think just kind of the orchestra of what was created was can be reflected, and if you brought this movie back 50 years ago, and not just because of the art style, but because of kind of the menial, banal nature of some of these things and how we impart significance upon them. It's just, I think some people would be a little astounded, and I don't think that necessarily was as common, like in post-war America. So, what do you guys think? I don't know. As far as what it says to 2012,
I have a similar take. Yeah, no, I feel like it's and I had trouble with this. That it's this extreme privileging of the kind of the very subjective, which I guess is all we've got, which is one thing to say for it. But it does speak to the idea that yes, you said so well, Kirk. This like we need this hyper emotional reality to life, and that's all it is. We need some kind of story or narrative about life, or it needs to have some kind of conclusion, right? And that we need all of our little infinitesimal moments to be special, which everyone's had, even like the greats of history, right? So it's like it seems like it might just be a solace for. I don't know, for something else, or not being interested in other ideas, or trying to do something else. But it's tough for Bill's case because he has this mental illness that's debilitating, right? So, but I don't know. So I thought it was a little bit, it has its kind of, there's an element of narcissism or complete self-absorption to it that, to me, I'm ambivalent about. I feel that myself. Sometimes I find it to be very important. Other times I feel that maybe it could be an unproductive way of thinking. But nevertheless, are we voting?
I thought we were. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, I kind of went off.
I'll vote then. So I've kind of changed my mind. I was feeling a no at first, but I think because it's got me thinking a lot, and it was just a very beautiful movie, and it had a lot to say, or it had, a very interesting message. Perhaps cliche, but that's not, a cliche isn't wrong. I think a cliche can be a cliche. The only thing that's wrong about a cliche is that it's useless and no one listens to it or pays attention to it. The thing about it, the same idea that a cliche says could be arrived at by some other way. So I think, and this is a movie that does that, it brings us to the cliched thing about you got to appreciate the little things by its own kind of unique route. So I think I'd give it a yes.
Kirk, you were...
I vote yes.
Okay. Wow.
Even though it's kind of one of those things where, towards the end, but I like to examine, the survey of thoughts that I have about the movie, and so
Great.
I enjoyed it, and a plus is that it was only 60. What was it?
62 minutes.
62 minutes. Yeah. That's a big plus.
It's like the opposite of a Connor movie.
Yes, I'm sorry to say.
Anthony.
Well, it would have been a no, but I mean,
well, it is a no.
It is a no.
But yeah, but
for
like,
posterity,
it'll be marked down. It'll be marked down in history. It's a Supreme Court decision.
Yes.
You have to write your dissent.
dissenting opinion.
So Anthony has never voted yes in any of my movies. So I don't know.
I voted yes on.
No, you didn't. I assure you.
I don't even know. I can't even remember.
I know each movie you did not vote yes on any of them.
Every no is burned into his psyche.
I was going to quickly say though, is Kirk's point at the very end right there is actually kind of interesting because it reminded me of a lot of criticism thrown at a lot of bands actually. That like the sort of ideas of narcissism in your music and finding things in the infinitesimal really reminds me of what people talk about when they complain about like a band like Bright Eyes or something. This is kind of really interesting.
Sure, tired
sort
of it.
Yeah, I mean they're very much of the same period too. So random thought.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Well, I have a movie in finally after a year.
Sound effect.
Over a year.
No, that's for unanimous yeses.
Unanimous.
Anthony ruined it for us. But
Oops.
all right, so who wants to wait? So who? How do we decide who goes first in the vote?
Whoever went least recent could go.
Well, you, not you.
I went before you.
I went least recent.
So Kirk,
I'll go last. I want to hear what I'm up against.
Okay, so
who do you want to go first?
Pick someone.
Anthony can go
first.
Yeah, go ahead.
If that's all right.
Yeah. So sorry, I just don't have the year of my movie offhand. So the movie I'm going to pick is a 1971 film starring Clint Eastwood.
Oh, cool.
It's a film that actually I did not know this until very recently. Actually, just a moment ago when I looked it up. I had been wanting to nominate this movie for a long time for Tony. Not because I think it's actually like a movie we'd see and be like, oh, that's a Tony movie or anything. Just because I think of all the ones here, he'd have the most interesting reading of it. But it's 1971's movie, The Beguiled. Should I just discuss it first, or would you go after?
Well, you can rebut later, I guess. So.
All right, okay.
All right, so Connor. Connor.
Okay. That's all you wanted to say about it for now?
I think
we can do a rebuttal and elaborate.
Okay, so I'm going to recommend, I think it's 2007, Steven Soderbergh's The Informant. This is a movie that I think is right up Tony's alley. I suppose I won't introduce it now. I guess we'll wait for the rebuttals.
Okay.
Well, maybe we should just give a synopsis.
All right, fine.
Okay, sorry.
Explain what it's about.
The Beguiled is about Clint Eastwood is a former Union soldier during the Civil War who is basically injured and hobbles his way into what I believe is a Mississippi town, small town where all the men had basically gone away to fight in the war, and he's taken in and basically healed by the girls of the town of all various ages. And he begins to realize that he could probably manipulate the situation in his, sexual favor, only for him to begin to do so, and the girls begin to realize what he's up to. And the film begins from there.
This is a movie for Tony.
It is. I will say this because of what it sounds like. It's actually very much considered like it's a very like heavy, dark melodrama in a way. It's interesting because it sort of ties in the late 60s.
Yeah,
the 70s, but anyway, I'll get into
that sounds really interesting. I've never heard of it before. Okay, 2009 is The Informant. It was 2009, by the way. It's sort of a true crime story about essentially about agricultural price fixing and other sort of iniquities. Follows Matt Damon as Mark Whitaker, who's an informant for the FBI. And it's sort of a dark comedy take on the true crime. It's very hilarious. It's very lots of humor, of course, and fascinating musical choices. Very stylized, Soderbergh style. And I think Tony will like it because it sort of has an element of ordinary man's kind of downward spiral into evil in a really interesting way.
Interesting. Okay. I think I will. Been kind of putting some things together in my head, and I think I'm gonna go with 1992's Basic Instinct. I know Tony hasn't seen it. I know.
I think you've seen one part of it.
Yeah.
You've seen a clip of it.
Yeah. Let's just say that's the seller right there.
Yeah.
All I have to do is show you some pictures, some stills from Mr. Skin, and you'll be in. Some time. I'll give you a timestamp. We'll leave the room. Basic Instinct. I recently saw it for the first time. It takes place in San Francisco. Michael Douglas. It's very similar to. He's in another thriller, very similar to this, of that era.
Fatal Attraction or something.
Yeah, something like that. But the movie, the real star of this movie is Sharon Stone. She's unbelievable in this movie. I think she's so underrated as an actor. I think she's incredibly intoxicating and at the same time repulsive, and just there's these incredible sequences of, it's very cliched in a lot of ways with its violence and how it builds its drama, but in other ways it's totally new, and you can see how it kind of influenced cinema later on, just in various different ways, which I can talk about more. But
okay. So Anthony, why is your rebuttal?
Well, can I rebuttal last since I went first? Or
is that how that works?
Oh, I don't know.
I mean, I think it's up to Kirk to reorder again.
I don't. We'll let Connor go first.
Okay, I'll rebut. Okay, so my problem is that I know so painfully little about the other two's movies, although that shouldn't necessarily stop me. I would say, what is that? The Bavile movie? Yeah, sorry, I'm not even going to try. I don't know much about the ones. I got to say, Anthony's is very tempting. It sounds very, very interesting. I love that period of film, something I've never watched. Clint Eastwood, oh my goodness. And Basic Instinct just sounds like it'd be good to watch. I can't really think of a good argument against them. I'll just argue for my movie that I think it is squarely in Tony's wheelhouse, although Anthony's might be too. And I think he would really enjoy it, and it's kind of a fun movie.
Okay.
Do you want me to go, Kirk?
Sure.
All right. So I haven't seen either of them. I know very little about Connor's movie, although I know it got pretty positive reviews at the time, but I know so little about it that I can't even offer a rebuttal.
Yeah.
Kirk's movie, I only know about it through hearsay, and for some reason that one clip posted on YouTube over and over again. I'm sure they both have an interesting thing to offer. I can't really say anything negative just for lack of knowledge, as Connor said. The Beguiled, I think, it's not a film that's recognized, I think, as a classic. It's not even one that, people are, I think, right now being like, oh my God, watch The Beguiled, maybe they are, I don't know. It's a 1971, so it's Clint Eastwood after The Man with No Name, after Dirty Harry, and it's sort of in this like peak run of his, and it's sort of, I think, just an overlooked movie that I think is just sort of interesting. I don't even know if more than one of these three would like it, honestly, besides myself.
That's the best way to convince Tony.
But I think in the end, I think Connor and Tony would definitely think it's interesting, and Kirk would be a wild card on that factor. So,
Okay.
All right. Well, what do you have to say?
Let me just check to see. So your movie was called Girls Gone Wild with Clint Eastwood, and I really am interested in it. How that plays out. I don't think I'd watch more than 5 minutes of it because I wouldn't need to, if you know what I mean. Tony's winking right now, but Connor's movie, is another kind of sexually explicit movie. In George Foreman, I don't really want to talk about it, but maybe a first watch could be elucidating in some way. But mine is also sexually explicit. There are many sex scenes, and I'm directly talking to our host. I hope you pick it. It's very good. San Francisco is a good city. It's got some if you like Bullet and you like Dirty Harry and you like some other movies that were probably there.
If you like the movies,
say the same. Say the same for Beguiled. Yeah.
Yeah. No.
So wait, this is a pro-life movie called Basic Instinct. Is that
There we go.
All right.
No. These all sound pretty good, actually. Like
They're a range of years.
I haven't seen any of these, so I don't really have an immediate bias. Anthony's, I have to say, since the most interesting. I have to go with Anthony's. The most
I thought you were going to do a butt.
No, it sounds the most kind of
Yeah,
intriguing.
you thought you were going to pull an Anthony, but I have to say, Anthony's does sound pretty.
No, that sounds
cool.
good. So we got to go with The Beguiled. So, all right, guys. Thank you for listening, as always, and we'll be back in 3 days with The Beguiled. Have a good night.
Thank you.